Rachel woke up at 2 in the morning and didn't know why. She lay still and stared at the ceiling of the Portland studio she'd checked into a few hours earlier. The room was dark, quiet. And then she heard it. A soft sound, low, like someone slowly shifting their weight on a hardwood floor. She held her breath and listened. It stopped. She waited. Nothing. She told herself it was the building. Old buildings make sounds. She closed her eyes and eventually fell back asleep. She'd booked a place for a 5-day work trip. Small studio, clean photos, a super host badge, good reviews. The host, a man named Daniel, had a professional profile and a bio that said he lived nearby and was always available if guests needed anything. She hadn't thought twice about it. She'd used Airbnb plenty of times before. The first thing she'd noticed when she arrived was the smell. Not bad, just lived in. Like someone had been there recently and the air hadn't fully settled. She assumed it was from the last guest. She opened a window, unpacked, and let it go. The next morning, she found a coffee mug on the drying rack next to the sink. She hadn't used it. She'd only used her own travel cup since she arrived, still sitting on the counter exactly where she'd left it. She picked up the mug and turned it over. Damp on the inside. Recently washed or recently used. She set it back down and stood there for a moment, just looking at it. She thought about it on the way to work, kept coming back to it. Told herself the cleaning crew had probably left it. Or maybe it had been there when she arrived and she hadn't noticed. By the time she got to her office, she'd almost convinced herself. Almost. When she came back that evening, the bathroom window was cracked open. She hadn't opened it. It was February. She had no reason to open a bathroom window in February. She stood in the doorway and looked at it for a long moment, then walked over and closed it, locked it. Tested the latch twice. Then she stood in the middle of the apartment and turned slowly and looked at everything. Her bag in the same spot, her laptop on the same corner of the desk, nothing obviously wrong. But the feeling was there. That low, persistent sense that the air in the room had been disturbed. She checked behind the closet door, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. She felt slightly ridiculous. She checked anyway. She messaged Daniel that night, asked casually whether anyone else had access to the unit. He replied within minutes, said no, the space was entirely private, hoped she was enjoying her stay. The message was smooth, warm even, but the speed of it, and the way it answered her question just enough without really answering it, sat with her in a way she couldn't shake. On day 3, she came home to a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. Neat, unhurried handwriting. Let me know if you need extra towels. D. She hadn't asked for anything. She hadn't messaged him since that first night. She read it twice. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and held it, and thought about all the things she'd been talking herself out of. The smell on the first night, the mug, the window, the sound at 2 in the morning. Each one alone was nothing. Together, they were something else. She called Airbnb support and reported everything. They told her to document what she could and said they'd look into it. She asked to be moved. They said it might take a day. She had one more night. She pushed a chair under the front door handle, propped her suitcase against the bathroom wall, sat on the bed with every light on and her phone unlocked in her hand. Around midnight, she heard it again. That soft, careful shifting from the other side of the bathroom wall. Not loud enough to be certain, just loud enough to exist. She didn't move. She sat there in the light and listened until it stopped. And then kept listening long after. The investigation found a secondary entrance, a panel in the bathroom wall leading to a utility corridor that ran behind several units in the building. It hadn't been disclosed. Daniel knew about it. His account was suspended. Rachel got a full refund. She still doesn't know if someone was in that apartment with her. The investigation didn't confirm it. What it confirmed was that the access existed, that it had been used, and that Daniel had said nothing. She said the thing she can't let go of isn't the sounds or the note. It's the fact that she almost explained all of it away, every single time. The front door was unlocked before Marcus touched it. He'd entered the code on the keypad and heard it disengage, and they pushed it open and stepped inside, and the house was already lived in. Not in an obvious way, no one was standing there, but the kitchen counter had groceries on it. Bread, eggs, a six-pack with 2 cans gone, a laptop open on the dining table, screen still on. 2 glasses of water, both half empty, sitting close together like someone had just stepped away. Shoes by the door, 2 pairs. Men's shoes, worn in, muddy at the soles. And the smell of something cooked recently still sitting in the air. Marcus called out. His voice went into the house and came back with nothing. He and Jen stood in the doorway and looked at each other, and didn't speak for a moment. Then he called the host. Carol sounded genuinely confused, said the house should be empty. Her last booking ended Wednesday. No one was supposed to be there. She told them to stay put. She'd figure it out. Her voice was calm, but the kind of calm that takes effort. Jen moved slowly through the first floor, while Marcus stayed near the door. Kitchen, living room, a small hallway bathroom. Everything quiet. At the end of the hall, the bedroom door was half open. She stopped just outside it, stood there for a second, then pushed it open with 2 fingers. The bed had been slept in recently. Sheets pulled back on one side, still shaped from someone who'd gotten up not long ago. A phone charger plugged into the wall, cable coiled in the nightstand. A half-empty glass of water, curtains drawn. The room was dim and very still. She backed out and returned to Marcus without saying anything. She didn't need to. They went outside and waited on the porch. The light was going orange through the trees. Neither of them talked much. Marcus kept his eyes on the driveway. Carol had said she was calling the police. About 15 minutes later, a truck came up the gravel, parked behind their car. 2 men got out. They looked surprised to see Marcus and Jen. Not panicked, not aggressive, just surprised. One of them, older, maybe 50, canvas jacket, looked at the house, then at them, then back at the house, and said in a completely reasonable voice, "You must have the wrong place." Marcus showed his confirmation on his phone. The man looked at it without stepping forward. Said there must be a mix-up. Said the house was his cousin's. They'd been there all week. His tone stayed even, casual almost. But his eyes moved constantly. To the front door. To Jen. To the driveway. To Marcus. Small, quick movements that didn't match the relaxed voice. The second man hadn't said a word. He was standing slightly behind, near the truck. Watching. Police arrived 20 minutes later. The investigation confirmed the 2 men had no authorization, no reservation, no connection to Carol. They had a key, likely copied before the locks were last changed, and had been using the property whenever it sat vacant between bookings. One of them had a prior record. What the record involved wasn't shared with Marcus and Jen. They were moved to a hotel that night. Airbnb covered it. But the detail that stayed with Marcus was something an officer mentioned quietly while walking back through the bedroom. Behind the headboard, on Marcus's side of the bed, the side he would have been sleeping on, there was a second phone charger. Not the one on the nightstand. A different one, tucked out of sight, plugged into the wall behind the frame. The officer said it was probably left behind by accident. Marcus said he's thought about it a lot since that weekend. 2 men with a key and a reason to come back. A house sitting in the trees with no neighbors. A Friday night. They'd arrived while it was still light. He thinks about that too. What the driveway would have looked like after dark. Whether the men would have driven up it at all if they hadn't been able to see 2 people already standing on the porch. He doesn't let that thought finish. Tom had been staring at the smoke detector for 10 minutes before he admitted to himself that something was wrong with it. He was sitting at the desk in the corner of the bedroom, working late, apartment quiet around him. He'd glanced up at the ceiling and his eyes had landed on it. And then he couldn't look away. The angle was off, not dramatically, just a few degrees forward. Like it had been taken down and replaced slightly differently than it was before. Most people wouldn't notice. He almost didn't. He stood on the desk chair and took it down. It was heavier than it should have been. He turned it over slowly. Recessed into the housing, barely visible, a lens, small, clean, roughly the size of a pencil eraser, positioned to cover the entire room. He stood on that chair and didn't move, just held it. Then he climbed down, set it face down on the desk, and covered it with a shirt, and sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at the room the way you look at a room when you're no longer sure what's in it. He'd booked the Austin apartment for a full week. 247 5-star reviews, years on the platform. Everything about the listing communicated safety and trust. He'd done what he always did, read a few reviews, checked the photos, booked without hesitation. He was an experienced traveler. He knew what to look for. Or thought he did. He started moving through the room slowly. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, exactly. Just anything that didn't belong. The digital clock on the nightstand. He picked it up, turned it over, looked at it from every angle. On the back, near the lower edge, another lens. Smaller than the first, angled slightly upward. Pointed at the bed. He set it down carefully, took a breath, took photos of both devices, wrote down exactly where each one was, how it was positioned, what it was pointing at. Then he messaged Airbnb's trust and safety team, filed a police report, and left the apartment. He checked into a hotel and sat in the lobby for a while before going up to his room, because he didn't feel like being alone yet. The host was arrested several weeks later. When investigators searched the apartment, they found recordings going back over 2 years. 2 years of guests, sleeping in that bed, moving through that room, not one of them knowing. Tom went back through the reviews afterward. He read through all of them. Guests who'd come for work, for vacation, for weekends away. They wrote about how clean the place was, how comfortable, how responsive the host was, how they'd book again without hesitation. Not one of them had said anything. What Tom comes back to, the part he can't put down, isn't finding the cameras. It's how close he came to not finding them. If he'd been sitting somewhere else in the room, if the light had been different, if he'd been tired enough to go to bed early instead of working late, he would have packed up on Saturday morning and written a 5-star review like everyone before him. And the recordings would have kept going. He checks smoke detectors now. Every room, every stay, before he puts his bag down, before he does anything else. He takes them off the ceiling and turns them over in his hands and checks the weight. He says it takes about 30 seconds. He says he'll never stop doing it.